Okay, so picture this. You're driving down this highway, right sun-baked asphalt shimmering ahead, and you're headed for this place, Death Valley. And it's a name that kind of sends chills down your spine. You know what I mean? Synonymous with like scorching heat and just unforgiving landscapes. But what if I told you there's more to Death Valley than meets the eye? Like beneath the surface of the hottest place on earth, there's this whole story, a story of like dramatic geological processes and surprising beauty, and a history as rich as the minerals hidden within its depths. So today we are going beyond the typical Death Valley travelogue. We're joined by an expert who can help us unearth the hidden gems of this unique national park. And we're using 12 best things to do in Death Valley National Park as our treasure map. Get ready to impress your friends with Death Valley facts they'd never guess, all while we uncover why this extreme environment is more inviting than you might think.
What I find so fascinating about Death Valley is it challenges our preconceived notions. We often just focus on the heat, which, yeah, it's undeniably intense. But understanding why it's so hot unlocks a deeper appreciation for the forces that have shaped this landscape over millions of years.
Right. And speaking of preconceived notions, our article starts with a surprising fact about the park's name. I always assumed it was all about the scorching temperatures, but it turns out Death Valley's history is a bit more chilling.
Exactly. The name actually comes from a group of pioneers who got lost trying to cross the valley during the winter of 1849-1850. Now, even though Death Valley isn't exactly a winter wonderland, only one person from that group actually perished there.
So the name is a bit of a misnomer then. Talk about an impactful first impression, though I imagine back then any journey through that landscape felt pretty perilous.
Absolutely. And that sense of risk, of venturing into the unknown, it's woven into the fabric of Death Valley's history. But it also kind of speaks to the human desire to understand and explore even the most extreme environments.
That's a great point. So let's dive into why Death Valley is so extreme geographically speaking. It's not just hot by chance, right?
You got it. Imagine this. You've got four, count them, four major mountain ranges encircling this valley. These mountain ranges, they act like giant walls blocking any moisture trying to make its way inland.
So any rain clouds are basically squeezed dry before they even reach Death Valley.
Essentially. And to make things even more intense, you're talking about a valley floor that sits below sea level. In fact, it's home to the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, Badwater Basin.
Okay, I've heard of Badwater Basin. But putting it in the context of the entire Western Hemisphere, that really drives home just how low it is.
Precisely. It's a staggering 282 feet below sea level. Imagine standing at the bottom of that basin surrounded by vast salt flats that stretch as far as the eye can see. Knowing you're actually lower than the ocean, it's an experience that truly shifts your perspective.
And to think those salt flats were once submerged underwater, right?
Yes. Over time, what little rain did fall would collect in the valley, forming a lake. But because the valley is essentially a closed basin, the water had nowhere to go except evaporate under that scorching sun. As it evaporated, it left behind all those dissolved salts, creating the otherworldly landscape we see today.
That's incredible. I'm already starting to understand how these seemingly barren landscapes are actually shaped by dynamic forces over millions of years.
And that's just the beginning. Our article highlights some truly mind-boggling spots that bring these geological processes to life.
Well, let's hear about them. What's first on our virtual Death Valley adventure?
Let's start with a spot that's not only visually stunning, but also deeply philosophical. Zabriskie Point.
Oh, yeah. I've seen pictures of Zabriskie Point, those incredible rippled badlands, almost like a giant sand sculpture. But what makes it philosophical?
So it's that unique landscape that actually captivated the mind of Michel Foucault, the renowned French philosopher.
Right, of course.
He once called his visit to Zabriskie Point the best experience of his life. Yeah. It's a place that seems to exist outside of time, where the Earth's raw power is on full display.
Wow, for a philosopher of his stature to have such a profound experience there, it makes you wonder what he saw in those badlands. And speaking of seeing, our article also mentions this place called Racetrack Playa, where rocks supposedly move on their own. I have to admit that sounds a little far-fetched, even for Death Valley.
I understand the skepticism. For decades, these sailing stones were a mystery that baffled scientists and fueled all sorts of speculation. Picture this, okay? A dry lake bed, completely flat. And scattered across it are rocks of various sizes, each with a long trail etched behind it, as if it had been dragged across the surface.
Okay, now that you describe it, it does sound pretty eerie. So how did they crack the case? Did those lost pioneers have anything to do with it?
As intriguing as that would be, the answer is much more grounded in natural phenomena. Remember how we talked about those four mountain ranges that keep Death Valley so dry?
Right.
Those mountains also funnel powerful winds down into the valley.
Okay, lots of wind I'm following, but how do we get from wind to rocks on the move?
It's a combination of factors. Every so often, usually in the winter, enough rain falls to create a thin layer of water on Racetrack Playa. At night, that water freezes into a sheet of ice, often thin enough that the rocks are still partially exposed. Then, as the sun comes up and the ice begins to melt, it breaks into large, thin panels. These panels, driven by those intense winds I mentioned, can actually push the rocks across the slick, muddy surface, creating those mysterious trails.
So basically, it's like wind-powered, ice-assisted rock sailing. Who knew something so simple could be behind such a long-standing mystery?
It's a testament to the power of observation, experimentation, and a healthy dose of curiosity. For years, people attributed it to supernatural forces. But in the end, it was a perfectly natural, albeit unusual explanation.
Well, I'm putting Racetrack Playa on my must-see list, though I'm guessing it takes a perfect storm of conditions for those rocks to actually set sail.
You're right, it's not something you're guaranteed to witness on any given trip. But that element of chance, of being in the right place at the right time, it's part of what makes Death Valley so captivating.
That's a great point. It reminds us that even in the most extreme environments, nature is always full of surprises. Speaking of surprises, our article also mentions Devil's Golf Course, which, if I'm being honest, doesn't sound very inviting for a round of golf.
And you'd be right. Forget lush fairways and manicured greens. Devil's Golf Course is a vast expanse of jagged salt formations, eroded and sculpted by wind and rain into a landscape that's as unforgiving as it is mesmerizing.
So where did the name come from? It sounds more like a place Dante would dream up than a golf course.
It's actually quite humorous. A 1934 National Park Service guidebook claimed, "Only the devil could play golf on such a course," due to its rough and uneven terrain. And honestly, looking out at those jagged salt pinnacles, it's hard to argue with that assessment.
Only in Death Valley would such a place get dubbed a golf course.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a perfect example of how this park's extremes can spark our imagination. It's not just about beauty, it's about the stories we tell about these places, the sense of wonder they evoke.
Precisely. And while we're on the topic of stories, Death Valley has a rich human history as well. Our article mentions the Harmony Borax Works, a relic of a bygone era when borax mining was a major industry in this region.
Borax mining. Now, that's not something you hear about every day. I have to admit, I don't even know what borax is.
Well, it's a naturally occurring mineral that was used in everything from detergents to cosmetics back in the late 19th century. And Death Valley, believe it or not, was one of the world's primary sources of this valuable commodity.
Wow, I had no idea. What can you tell us about these Harmony Borax Works? I'm picturing something out of an old Western film.
You're not far off. The Harmony Borax Works, now preserved as a historical site, offers a glimpse into the challenges and triumphs of this bygone era. Visitors can see the ruins of the processing plant, the bunkhouses where the workers lived, and most impressively, a 20-mule team wagon used to haul borax out of the valley.
Hold on, a 20-mule team, that's a lot of horsepower. What was it like for those teams hauling borax across such a harsh environment?
It was an incredible feat of logistics and endurance. Imagine guiding a 20-mule team in a wagon laden with borax across 165 miles of scorching desert, all while battling the heat and the elements. The journey from the Harmony Borax Works to the nearest railhead took weeks. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of those early borax miners.
Wow, just imagining the grit and determination it took to work in those conditions. It really adds another layer to our understanding of Death Valley beyond its stunning landscapes. It's a stark reminder of the human drive to not only survive, but to thrive even in the most challenging environments.
Absolutely. And that brings up an important point about experiencing Death Valley today. It's a place of breathtaking beauty and wonder. But it demands respect. Our article rightly emphasizes the importance of safety and preparation, especially when it comes to the extreme heat.
Right, those tips aren't just suggestions, they're potentially life-saving. Speaking of which, what would you say is the most important thing for visitors to keep in mind when planning a Death Valley adventure?
Hydration is key. The desert heat can be incredibly deceptive.
It's easy to get caught up in the scenery and forget you're in one of the hottest places on Earth.
Exactly. You can get dehydrated so quickly, it's crucial to drink plenty of water, even if you don't feel thirsty. And don't forget those electrolytes.
Oh, that's a really good point. Packing those electrolyte tablets or sports drinks is just as important as packing your camera right.
Absolutely. And speaking of packing, here's a tip that might surprise you. Be prepared for all kinds of weather. Death Valley is known for its extreme temperatures, but it can get surprisingly cold at night, especially during the winter months.
Oh, wow. So layers are key even in the desert.
Exactly. Think breathable fabrics, hats for sun protection, and a good windbreaker for those cool evenings. And don't even think about venturing out without sturdy footwear.
Now that we've covered the essentials, let's talk about those incredible hikes our article mentions. We touched on Zabriskie Point earlier, but Death Valley National Park is huge, the largest outside of Alaska. What else should intrepid explorers add to their list?
Well, even if you're not a seasoned hiker, there's something for everyone. Golden Canyon is a must-see, with its towering golden walls sculpted by centuries of erosion. It's like stepping into another world.
It sounds breathtaking. And manageable for those of us who aren't quite ready to tackle those backcountry roads you mentioned.
Exactly. It's a relatively short and scenic hike, perfect for experiencing the beauty of Death Valley's canyons without overexerting yourself.
That's good to know. Now, for those who are up for a challenge, what about those backcountry roads? Our article mentioned over 1,000 miles worth.
That's right. Death Valley is a four-wheel drive enthusiast's dream, but it's essential to be prepared. Make sure you have a reliable vehicle, plenty of water and supplies, and a good map. And always let someone know your itinerary before venturing off the beaten path.
Right, safety first, especially in such an unforgiving environment. So as we wrap up our Death Valley deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
I hope they come away with a sense of awe and wonder. Death Valley is so much more than just a hot, desolate place. It's a place of extremes, yes, but also of incredible beauty, fascinating history, and a surprising amount of life if you know where to look. It's a place that challenges our perceptions and reminds us of the power and fragility of the natural world.
Beautifully said. It's a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, discovery awaits those who dare to explore. Well, folks, that's it for our Death Valley adventure. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to learn more about this incredible park. Check out the full article with all its stunning photos, and maybe even start planning your own journey to this land of extremes. Until next time, keep exploring.